Welcome into the Concacast with Jon Arnold. I'm Jon Arnold. It's a regional soccer show that is often bilingual, but today will be only in English and will also consist of 3 segments. First, the big story. We'll talk about the CONCACAF Champions Cup and notably Cruz Azul advancing past crosstown rival Club América. We'll have an interview where we speak to the newest men's national team manager in the CONCACAF region, Jacques Passy of Antigua Barbuda. And we'll close out by reviewing the action in women's soccer this week, wondering if we should start panicking in the CONCACAF region. But first, it's the big story, and as I mentioned, it's Cruz Azul advancing past Club América to make it to the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals. América had frustrated Cruz Azul at nearly every step of the last several months. In a semifinal and in the final of the Liga MX tournament, the Liguilla, América was able to get past Cruz Azul, sometimes because of alleged referee help, sometimes because of great individual performances, but overall because América has been a better team. Cruz Azul's best chance looked to be manager Martin Anselmi, who showed up and immediately got results from La Máquina. Then, the team was remade somewhat in his image, bringing in key players from various parts of the world, including Major League Soccer. This Bogusz had a fantastic performance last night. Giakoumakis hasn't been as active or involved under new interim manager Vicente Sanchez. Why an interim manager? Because Anselmi left for Porto in a messy breakup that frustrated Cruz Azul fans and somewhat dampened their hopes for the season. And yet, at the end of the night, Cruz Azul fans were singing Vicente Sanchez's name because he had helped them get past América. 2 goals from Angel Sepulveda, he puts Cruz Azul up. América answers through Álvaro Hidalgo, the do-it-all midfielder, with a very nice goal that would have put América through had Cruz Azul not found another. But find another they did, once again through Sepulveda. He heads in, across, goes off to celebrate, and Cruz Azul is into the next round. América manager André Jardim said after that this could have been the semifinal or even the final of this type of tournament. That's how much respect he has for Cruz Azul, and you can understand why after the battles that they've had. This is the first significant one that he loses, the first significant failure of Jardin's tenure after winning back-to-back Liga MX championships, but it remains the title that's getting away from Club América. It's now been almost a decade since América won the CONCACAF Champions Cup. That's not bad necessarily, but by their own high standard, it's frustrating. This is the tournament that América really wanted to win this year, and they're frustrated not by any team, not by an MLS squad, but by a crosstown rival that they felt they were bigger than. While the Cruz Azul squad was made to succeed under Anselmi, it was also made of really good players, and Sanchez has been able to leverage that into a successful squad as well. We may well see a rematch of this series in the Liguilla because both América and Cruz Azul look very good in league play, in addition to trying to contest the Continental crown. We'll have to see what happens going forward. On the other side of the CCC bracket, matches that you may have already watched by the time you watch this video, Inter Miami LAFC and Pumas Vancouver Whitecaps in the deciding leg. I am hoping, I'll admit, for a final that pits an MLS team against the Liga MX team, because if we're looking at another Grande versus Grande, as good as it was on Tuesday night, I still think it would feel a little flat as the final. Now let's move into the interview where we're joined by Jacques Passy. Jacques is the only Mexican manager ever to manage 3 men's national teams outside of Mexico. He coached St. Kitts and Nevis, earning CONCACAF Coach of the Year award in 2018. He coached the Dominican Republic, and he's just accepted the job coaching Antigua and Barbuda. He sees a bright future for the team, even with some difficult June World Cup qualifiers looming. Let's move into the interview with Jacques Passy.
Thank you, John. I'm happy, and I'm happy to be with you as well.
Well, tell us about the new role with Antigua and Barbuda. What do you like about this challenge? What do you like about the team, the nation? I know that you've chatted with other CONCACAF nations in the past and have led certain teams, but what is it about this new challenge that attracts you, and what should fans expect?
I think that Antigua has a lot of things that are very positive. First of all, there is a very good local talent, and you know, this is something that is very remarkable. It's not always that you have that. Number 2, you have well over 50 international players that can represent Antigua. Maybe if you don't go deep enough, you're gonna see maybe 5 or 6 names, but once you start looking at players, you have players that play at the highest level in England, at the top divisions in other countries. You have a lot of young talent, and you have a country that I see is in a position in which basically is very similar to what I found with St. Kitts back in 2015. A country that is right now is falling very low on the FIFA ranking. I don't think you can get any lower. I mean, you can, but it's not going to happen. And you can do so much with Antigua. I mean, if I'm able to bring the right players and change the mindset and create the winning atmosphere I want to create, I am sure we can take Antigua to the top 10, 12 in CONCACAF, which would be remarkable.
It definitely would be remarkable. I want to talk about those players and the mentality, but first I wanted to ask you about the stage that you come in at. This is World Cup qualification. You have 2 matches coming in June, which I know preparations are already starting for. At the same time, it's the 2 teams that are the top seeded in the division, 2 teams advanced from the group. You have Cuba, you have Honduras. These are difficult games. I know you're not a guy to shirk a challenge, but what are you kind of hoping for from these June matches? What's reasonable? What do you look for when you look at what looks like from the outside the 2 hardest matches in World Cup qualification, and they're on your plate?
You see, because if you use the word what is reasonable, then I have to tell you that reasonable is to lose both games, right? But the reality is that they didn't bring me to be reasonable. They brought me to change the mindset. So what I can tell you is that my intention is to change the mindset and the standards and the professionalism and the way you approach these games from day one. So what will that be in terms of how will that result in terms of the match results? I don't know. But what I can tell you is that you're going to see an Antigua national team that is going to play those matches to win both matches. That doesn't mean that we're going to go out like crazy and play 4-2-4 and attack. No. We're going to play those matches in a very smart way because we need results quickly, John. This is not, you know me for a very long time now, and you know that I'm not a coach that says, I'm here for the long term and let's go slowly. I don't believe in slow processes. I believe that changes need to be seen very rapidly, very quickly. And my intention is in those matches to have results. And when I mean results is we need to get points in those 2 matches. I know that the dream of being in the World Cup at this moment is impossible for Antigua, but you never know, John. You never know in football. What I can tell you is that from day one, Antigua is gonna think about those matches as matches that are must wins for us. Must wins for us. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I'm not gonna carry the burden of 2024, which the results were awful. And it's a shame because they had a very, very good coach and they had very, very good players, but it just wasn't there. It wasn't the year. But what I can tell you is that I am looking for good results and a significant change in the national team in those 2 matches.
More than 10 matches without a victory, no wins in 2024. The last win came back in October 2023. You mentioned a mentality change. I know that some of that will come with player recruitment, but you also talked about the strong local base that Antigua has. How important is it to convince players that you can lead them to these types of results, not necessarily even in World Cup qualification, but perhaps going forward where they're celebrating wins and they're not talking about a multi-digit winless skid? How much do you need to change just that mental side?
It's fundamental, and you need to change a lot because once you are in a position in which you haven't won a game since October 2023, what happens is that some players and many people are they start thinking that the country doesn't have what it takes to win. So you're engaging with players in conversations with players, and everyone is frustrated. So the change needs to happen immediately. And I think that it's important because it's going to be a fresh start, and I think it's going to be fresh tactics and a fresh idea. So yeah, I know we have 2 very complicated matches. Cuba and Honduras are very, very complicated. I know both teams pretty well. I've studied both teams. I've seen the last basically 6 or 7 games of both Honduras and Cuba. But John, when you take over a national team that hasn't won in a year and a half, you can't think that it's going to be 1 or 2 slight changes that are going to make the difference. You need to get involved as deep as possible in the entire mindset and the entire culture surrounding the team, and that's what I plan on doing.
I imagine that winless run also complicates a bit player recruitment. You reference some of the players who might be eligible, players who are based in England. You have to sort of convince them that it will be fun to play for the national team, right? Yes, it's an honor. Yes, they want to sing the anthem, wear the badge on the shirt. But I mean, if you just come over the Atlantic, take your valuable time during an international break and have a bad time and lose, they're probably not going to keep showing up. What have the conversations been like as you sort of start to try and really deepen the player pool of Antigua? Working both with the local players, but also trying to find some of the players who are eligible, who perhaps haven't come, who perhaps haven't filed a change of association. What are those conversations like? And if you can, let our viewers know of anybody maybe that would be exciting, maybe that's signing up, if you want to tease anything out.
Yeah, the conversations have been great, have been awesome, beyond my expectations. Because yes, when I started these conversations, I thought that what you just said was going to be like the essence of every conversation. Why should I go? Why should I go to a team that's been winless for a year and a half? Why should I go to a team in which the culture surrounding the team is not the right culture? They're not the right standards. But I feel that the conversations have gone pretty well. I've spoken to well over 20 overseas players, and the response has been beyond belief, John. I mean, once everyone understands that the plan is there, that there is a clear path, that there is a mentality and the standards, then just players want to give it a shot. And the important thing is that if we are able to bring some of these players that are very, very good players, I would say that you have to comply with the expectations. So the camp needs to be great, and what I can tell you is that we're going to have a very, very good base of overseas players. And once they're there, it's not going to be overseas or local. It's just going to be Antigua and Barbuda national football team. But yes, the camp, yes, in June, we are going to have overseas players and have very, very good players because the conversations have been great during the last month. In terms of players, John, what I can say is yes, you have some players in the Premiership that are really, really great players. But you cannot expect players like Kyle Walker-Peters or Philogene to come right now, because why would they come? I mean, honestly, if you're a player that has 100 games in the Premiership and you're 26, 27 years old, and okay, you're not going to get called by England probably, but why would you waste your time in going to a national team that hasn't won, that you hear that things don't work out? So, this is stage by stage, game by game. But in this first stage, we need to get players that are still willing to give it a shot, that maybe are not playing at Premiership level. Maybe they're not playing in the highest division, but yes, they are playing in Championship, in League One, League Two, and that they understand that they can be fundamental and instrumental in leading the way with us together. So what I'm trying to do is build a great team in which the words overseas and local players disappears, and it's going to disappear. And I'm going to create a great base. And from that great base, once we start getting one or two good results, and once we start getting comments from players themselves, because they're the best ambassadors, then I can go after the absolute top players. I can't go after them before this, because if I approach Kyle Walker-Peters, he's gonna laugh, well, I'm not gonna go there. But if I approach him and he sees, this is this project is for real, and look at the change that has happened, and he's gonna come, and he's gonna come and he's gonna do great things.
Last thing I wanted to ask you, Profe, you mentioned watching the last 6, 7 matches of Cuba, of Honduras. I know that you are not unlike myself, unlike our viewers who probably just are already doing that for fun. But when we hear about managers like Bielsa and these other managers who kind of do this intense study before taking a job, I can tell you the 50 players. It sounds like you've quite deeply researched the pool as well. Pull back the curtain a little bit. Tell us what it was like to analyze taking this job, as you kind of continue to look for who's eligible to represent us, who can we call, how do I get in touch with them, that scouting element, but also looking at how's Antigua played the last year, how much footage have you been watching, what have you been doing, and how's that process been going?
You see, so let me subdivide your question, right? So thing number one is I've seen every game that Antigua has played in the last 2 years. This is obvious. And the important thing about recruiting in terms of Antiguan players is not limiting yourself to those players that are known, because there are a huge amount of players that have Antiguan grandparents, either a grandfather or a grandmother, that have Antiguan parents, or that can play for Antigua and have never been called upon, because that's where the real juice is, because if you only look at players that have played for Antigua before, then obviously you're limited to those players and to those videos. So yes, I've seen the videos of Antigua of every single game, the footage of every single game, but at the end of the day, most importantly, the recruitment has been clinical, because I've talked to so many scouts that represent Caribbean players, and they said, did you know that this player has an Antiguan grandfather? And I said, no, I didn't even know that. So we've brought to the table some players that are remarkable players with potential that can play for Antigua, that perhaps they didn't even know that they could play for Antigua, or the Antiguan FA didn't know they could play for Antigua. So that's part number one. Part number two, in terms of analyzing Cuba and analyzing Honduras, it's Cuba is a little more complicated, just because of the fact that in the last two games they started bringing European players, and that change in the rule, in which they are now basically allowed to bring every Cuban player that can play for Cuba, and that there is no, before it reminds me a little bit about Suriname, because before Suriname started bringing the European players, it was okay, the local players and that's it. But now, like, if you see, it's not only one or two players, but they are bringing every eligible player that could potentially play for Cuba. And then you see players that are playing in Italy, you see players that are playing in England, and like the two last matches of Trinidad, you could see that they didn't have perhaps the chemistry. It's logical. It's going to happen to every team. It's going to happen to us, maybe, that the chemistry is not going to be there from day one. But it represents a very interesting analysis, because it's tough to understand who's coming in the next match, right? Because potentially they can bring 6 or 7 players, different players, and that would make a huge change. Now, they're not going to understand how I'm going to play either, but that's another thing. Honduras is easier. I saw both games against Bermuda. I saw games, all of the games that happened last year. Obviously, it's a very good team, very, very good team. It's a team that beat Mexico 2-0 in Honduras. Granted that maybe by the time they play us, they're going to be through and they're going to be in. So it could potentially mean that they're going to come out with reserves, or players that have not been regular players. So let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be watching those games and watching the progress of Antigua and Barbuda going forward. Jacques Passy, thanks for joining us today. Best of luck.
I appreciate it, John. It's always a pleasure to speak to you.
Thanks again to Jacques Passy for joining us in the interview. I'll have a written piece up on the Getting CONCACAF newsletter if you'd like to go even more in depth about what he plans to do with the Antigua and Barbuda national team. I'd like to close out today's show by talking about the women's international break that recently concluded. Before the international break, I wrote that I didn't feel like it would be an interesting window in the Americas. After all, the big teams in the region aren't going to play any competitive matches until October 2026. There's a Copa América in there for the South American teams, but the big teams in CONCACAF really don't have that much to play for in 2025. Perhaps that's a good thing, because the United States fell to Brazil, Canada fell to Argentina, the first time ever losing to that South American nation, and even Haiti, a team that made the World Cup last time around, fell in their second game against Chile after getting a win. I wrote about the atmosphere in that first game, which was open to fans. I wrote about how it was going to be a big moment for the Haitian diaspora, and they definitely showed up in Chile, a great atmosphere that maybe helped fuel the team to a victory. They didn't have that same support in the second game, which was played at the Chilean Federation headquarters, so perhaps a little bit more difficult. It's also probably wrong to judge the women's senior national teams on this window. After all, as I mentioned, it is the time for experimentation, to trying new things out, to accepting a defeat or a less good result at the risk of learning more about your team, because everyone's looking toward 2027 at the latest, 2026 for some regional competition. And it's understandable that these managers would want to see different players. I think the most interesting women's national team right now in the CONCACAF region is Mexico, which beat a Jamaica team that went to the World Cup in 2023, although they were missing several important players, 3-0 and then 4-0. in a series of friendlies that took place here in the United States. Mexico has long seemed like the sleeping giant in the region. When I lived in Mexico, I would always see girls and women playing the sport, and as Liga MX Femenil continues to grow, there's a domestic league that players can aspire to and then help those players get better. And yet, everyone thought that the Mexican team would qualify, especially with qualification being held on home soil. It was a massive disappointment that they weren't able to get there, and now it looks like things are going in the right direction. It's like this before, but this current generation of Mexico players has that chip on their shoulder from missing the last World Cup, and they're desperate to get to 2027, maybe even help host games in the 2031 World Cup, which will take place in the US with assistance from another CONCACAF nation, we believe, at least judging from what FIFA said in the last week. Just like it's not time for the United States or Canada or Haiti or Jamaica to hit the panic button, it's not time for Mexico to hit the celebration button or whatever the opposite of the panic button is. I guess the relaxation button. We don't have to worry about it because it's not time to hit it yet. Mexico still has a long road ahead before they're talking about even qualifying for the World Cup, much less planning that trip to Brazil. But the window after window after window work and improvement that we're seeing from the Mexico women's national team definitely gives a sense that the sleeping giant may be waking up. And in an international window that saw many disappointments from the traditional powers in the region, you feel that Mexico has a path, an opportunity. They just need to figure out how to actually take it this time around. More truly competitive teams for those World Cup slots should only make power teams like the US and Canada even stronger as they see more frequent top competition, although they both have plenty to work on already after disappointing in this international window. That about does it for the Concacast with Jon Arnold this week. I've been Jon Arnold. Thanks again for joining. Come back next week when we'll talk about the Gold Cup draw, which takes place on Thursday night, wrap up the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and touch on whatever else interests us from the CONCACAF region. Talk to you guys next week. Take care.